Hey, happy Valentine's Day. Back in the saddle. I was in Florida this weekend. Got the old Starbucks lined up, as you know I like to do. Well, on this Valentine's Day, I don't know what could be more romantic than talking about blending drum samples with live drums. Now, I'm just working still on this Mags record, and one thing I don't know if I've ever talked about is sort of how I like to approach different like levels of drum samples. And I've talked a little bit about like, peak information versus average information, but sometimes I wonder if I've talked enough about like the repetition of that peak information. As you get more peak information in a smaller amount of time, the average volume goes up. So you could think about it like big, like halftime snare comes down and then you don't hear one for a while. It's like peak and then wait and then peak, but then like a 16th roll, right? Like, or whatever, that's going to be very different. And I think when we're blending drum samples, even if we want them to be really transparent in our mixes, one thing that we don't always think about is like how, or I think something that stands out actually is when you hear like a drum roll. For me, that's usually the dead giveaway that drum samples are in the mix. It kind of pulls me out of the whole thing. Another one's like blast beats. So I thought, let's look at that. Also, I forgot to change the lens on my camera. This is a 50 millimeter. I'm just kind of going for it. It's more squishy, but better background blur. Let me know if you like this one or the old one. The 20 is a little wider. Super nerdy, who cares? But I'm still curious. All right, let's breeze through this real quick. So here's the drums. We'll play this passage real quick. On the left, you're going to have my main sample. Again, these are not final levels. I'm just starting this song this morning. Currently, I kind of think that the snare sample is a little loud just in general anyway right now, so I expect it to go down. But it's also kind of like a cool opportunity to showcase this little thought I'm having. So this is snare top. This is normal snare. Gated, but it's the one that was played. And then this one is my, I guess, just normal snare that I use primarily of the time unless I go into a roll, like we can see here. I'll get a little closer here. So we can see here, and you're going to see the settings are different. So if I go to the curves on both, for my snare main, because I'm primarily not using it, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see if I'm using decapitator to take off the top end and try to kind of get it to be a little bit more invisible. I typically, when I'm going for like a real snare vibe, the high end of the sample is one of like the dead giveaways as to, like what makes it sound too samply. So I rolled that off. This is my main snare. If we go down here, and you can see my range is 127. That is to say, I've essentially just made this a one shot that I'm tucking under the real snare. However, if we go here to snare roll and we look at these settings, we're going to see that the dynamics are still pretty limited, but I'm letting the range open up a lot because a snare drum just doesn't sound the same when it's hit hard as when it's hit soft. So let's kind of hear this in context. Gotta go and get some. Tell me that you want me and I told you truth hurts. I don't want to do it if it's really no fun. So we'll solo the drums there. And here, how you can hear that graduation of the different snare hits. That's really helpful. If I put it up here, I'm not even sure if it'll grab the first hits up here because my detail settings are higher than they are here, but it's probably going to sound more machine gunny, which is like my least favorite thing in the entire world. Still not terrible. That's a testament to the fact that I'm leaning on the volume of my real snare more than anything else. But still, I think it makes a nice appreciable difference when we make a new track here. I like to do this instead because I don't love playing with automation lanes when I don't have to. So if I can come up with something, and particularly if we're just like blending from underneath, if I can just come up with something where I just go like, oh, is that a 16th roll? I cut it out, I drop it down, and then it blends in pretty well. And maybe I do a little volume automation or something like that to smooth it out. I find that works better than just using one track that is your snare sample track, and then all of a sudden you have to automate like all of these different lanes. Like you have to automate like mix and detail and output volume and stuff like that. So most of the time, I'd say all the time, my computer's powerful enough so I can just basically like, I have enough CPU headroom for basically as many tracks as one could ever hope to have. So I'll just make another track because just managing it is that much easier. That is your Valentine's Day quick tip. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time I have some weird epiphany while I'm mixing.